Welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at the continued queer coding of Mike Wheeler throughout Stranger Things Season 5. If you thought this stopped after Season 4 with them deciding to make them 11 their plan for Endgame, which you'd perhaps expected that was their plan, you'd be wrong. Now, whether or not these things were all actually intentional at this point, honestly, I don't know what to think anymore after Season 5 then that documentary. And perhaps some of these decisions were made by set designers and actors earlier on in the season before they actually knew how the story was going to end. Assuming, as the story was suggesting, that Byler was going to be the endgame, perhaps some of these choices were just cruelly part of the queer baiting to keep us guessing, or perhaps the Duffers just don't properly do their research about some of the references and storytelling methods they're including. Honestly, I don't know anymore. But my take is that once a story is out there, you're giving it to the audience, and despite whatever your intention was about some of these things, they are there, and we can see them, and therefore we're going to talk about them and interpret them. So, with that preamble, we'll get straight into it. And also, sorry, my voice sounds a bit weird. I've kind of been sick all week, so bear with me here. Number 1. Byler scenes having romantic cinematography and acting choices. Following on from the pattern set by the earlier seasons, such as in the van and the cabin scene in Season 4, Season 5 had the main Mike and Will scene bathed in a soft, warm light in a golden field with hopeful, uplifting music and a literal signal tower frame between them showing open communication and fitting into the earlier talk of sending and receiving signals between two people who are secretly in love. Also, the dialogue and the way it's played out by the actors is very flirty. They complement each other and they use the language of D&D which they both understand and appreciate, and we see them both looking open, hopeful, and like they're trying something new and are open to new possibilities. I made a whole video breaking down this scene if you're interested, by the way, after Volume 1. Number 2. The imagery surrounding suppressed feelings and them eventually bursting. The whole sequence from the sorcerer with the pipe breaking and Mike and Will trying to stop it from bursting. In my opinion, this was very clear imagery for the suppressed feelings and emotions, which will keep building up and eventually burst because they can't be repressed forever. Not to mention that this comes in an episode full of a very specific genre of jokes, I'll say. And again, I have a whole video breaking down this scene that I made after Volume 1. Now, you could argue that this is purely about Will and his feelings, which then lead to him accepting these feelings and later coming out. However, I think this clearly applies to Mike too. It's Mike that breaks the pipe first, and it's Mike who's the first one to notice the leak. And the two are very clearly paired together here. They could have chosen anyone, but they chose Mike, trying to stop the pipe bursting as it keeps getting worse and worse, and then them trying to stop the military breaking down the door and finding them. Mike is definitely the character with the most suppressed feelings in the show, and I'm not even here talking exclusively about feelings for Will, but just in general, as he's become so used to having to repress his emotions, probably due to these feelings and also due to probably the attitude with his dad in his home. And he's become so used to having to repress emotion in every aspect of his life, he now struggles to show it at all. However, we can see that this can't last forever, and while we may have been robbed from seeing the epic Mike crash out we deserved in the show, I think we all know one is coming in the future at some point. I'm sure we've all seen the various memes that's been going around of Mike 30 years in the future when Good Luck Babe comes on the radio. Yeah, Mike, we'll let you figure that one out in your own time. Number 3. Acting more platonic towards Elle and still being able to say I love you to Elle in her very last moments. Now, in hindsight, I think sadly the purposeful ambiguity of Mike and Elle's relationship was to keep both the Malevans and Byler's hoping is kind of pretty obvious now, and also very cruel. However, ignoring the writing politics for a second and just looking at the actual characters and what we got in the show, Mike and Elle are so much more platonic this season. They don't kiss until the final episode, they sit apart from each other when talking one on one, they speak about the future as a group, and never refer to each other in a romantic sense. When you compare this to what was happening in season 3, it feels like a whiplash to watch. Now, I think some of this could be attributed to them both being older now. Out of that first new relationship where all they want to do is call each other girlfriend and boyfriend and make out. However, this can only account for so much, and I don't think it can account for the total lack of romantic interaction between them now. And when we finally do get them 11 kiss right at the end, it still seems kind of forced and strained. Mike won't even hold Elle really, and he can't even say he loves her back, even though he knows this is the last opportunity he'll ever have to say it. And when we had all of season 4 and part of season 3 with its arc revolving greatly around not being able to say he loved Elle and finally saying it, only while using Will's words and Will's motivation, mind you, only now when it's just him, he can't say it. This is very odd. My belief is that because Mike knows it's not true, and he's not the kind of love that Elle wanted, and that's why he can't say it. After all, one of his core beliefs are friends don't lie. Also, I thought I would add that after the ambiguous ending, it's unclear if this conversation ever actually happened, with Owl not being able to use the powers with the military blasting the sound wave things. And if you're still listening to and believe in the Duffers brothers interview, apparently, according to them, this is all in Mike's head anyway. So officially, in reality, there is no Malevolent kiss in season 5, no confirmation they're still together this season, and Mike's subconscious, even in this version, knows he was never in love with Elle. He still can't say it, and maybe he's thinking back to season 4 when they had that argument. Moving on. Number 4. Mike's bedroom and closet imagery. One of the clearest pieces of queer coding of Mike, in my opinion, and one that shows that it was definitely intentionally planned to some degree at some point, is the closet imagery through the one-way sign we saw pointing to his closet back in season 4. Still there, by the way, in season 5 during the demo attack, where Ted is literally thrown through this closet, breaking it open. Now, I don't think this can be dismissed as an accident. Someone from the set specifically went out and brought that one-way sign, they placed it in front of the closet, and then they specifically chose Mike's closet to be the wall that Ted fell through. Out of all the other walls in the Wheeler household, mind you, and that stunt had to be a very carefully planned out and rehearsed moment, not just a casual decision or mistake. And also, this isn't the first time in the show closet imagery has been associated with Mike. More about that back in this video. And if you thought that was the end of that one-way sign, no. We see it right down to Mike's last moments, with the room we see in his picture of himself in the future still having that one-way sign. We can't see the closet in this room, but if it's a dorm room as it appears to maybe be, it would kind of make sense if the closet was to the right of Mike here based on layouts of those sort of rooms, meaning this sign may still be pointing to that closet, with Mike still being unable to come out and being in the closet still. And while we're on the topic of Mike's epilogue bedroom, he still has Will's painting hung up on the wall, which we never found out if he discovered the truth behind this, and at this point it's just haunting the narrative as much as Tammy Thompson. But it's still there, and it represents the true person Mike fell in love with in season 4 via the Cyrano trope. That is still always with him now, whether or not he actually knows the truth. Also, people have pointed out this poster in Mike's room, which is of Jack Kerouac, sorry if I pronounced that very wrong there, who was a bisexual author, with one of his most famous works being about the love for another man through the veil of a deep and special friendship. And even when they part ways at the end in the book and he's with a girl, he still keeps thinking back to this person. I'll link below the Reddit post where I saw this, and it goes into a lot more detail if you're interested. Number 5. Mike's taste in music. We get a peek into Mike's taste in music for his song choices for the record bomb in season 5. Which, side note by the way, is kind of quite dark that it's Mike's bomb that destroys the Upside Down, and as a result, kills Elle. But anyways, we get 2 song choices by Mike here, the first one being Human Cannibal by the Butthole Surfers. The name itself obviously kind of having queer undertones, and also being a punk rock band, part of that rebellious kind of counterculture movement going on. The lyrics of Human Cannibal is said to focus on the aftermath of a painful relationship that's become destructive. Lyrics include talking about how loving this person used to feel easy and unrestrained, but is now painful, and that part of yourself was introduced to this person but then had to leave. This does have some similarities to the closeness of young Mike and Will, and the easiness of the relationship back then, and being able to show love and affection to one another without all the societal implications of that. And how over time, with them discovering these new parts of themselves and the attitudes of the world, they've had to repress them. The second song Mike chooses is Prince's Purple Rain, a song about the end of the world in an apocalypse, finding love and faith, and being renewed after a loss and tragedy. Some of the lyrics talk about not wanting to have caused the person you love pain, wanting a deep love and connection, a friendship or relationship coming to an end, accepting times are changing, new things are coming, and accepting this ending together. Elements of the song can be related back to both Mike and Elle and Mike and Will, it's worth noting. Also, while Prince himself wasn't openly LGBT, he did have a very queer fan base, often challenging gender roles through his fashion, performances, and exploring some of these themes in his songs. I also don't think I could discuss Mike and music without discussing David Bowie's Heroes, which played in the end credits of the final episode. I will go over, I say, the interesting choice of this by the Duffers, and I suspect the not so great intentions behind placing it here after knowing what the show and the fans had come to associate this with on another day, because I have thoughts, but for now I'll just say it's obviously a song that does have a lot of LGBT messages, and Bowie himself being a bi man and having a large queer fan base, and in season 5 even hinting at Mike, who apparently he wanted to have an orange mohawk, perhaps taking inspiration from Bowie, similar to how Will is known to like his music. Number 6. Mike's changes in showing physical affection for Will, even in a platonic way. A very inconsistent thing with Mike this season is the way he changes in showing physical affection and emotional vulnerability with Will, even in a platonic way. In Volume 1, one of the things fans loved the most was the return of leader Mike, who seemed to be back to his old self after the odd behaviour of Season 3 and 4 and these odd interactions, and was now okay again with comforting Will and being emotionally and physically close to him again. Even in the start of episode 5 we saw this. However, later on, especially after Will's coming out and Mike's unclear reaction to this scene, we don't really see Mike touch Will again, and if anything, he's kind of physically trying not to. Now, this could be seen as an homophobic response, unfortunately quite common when people start treating friendships differently after someone has come out. However, given how we've seen Mike defend Will from homophobic bullies multiple times and stood up for him, this seems very odd. And like many of us have discussed before, internalized homophobia seems the much more likely explanation here, and would align with Mike's character changes a lot better and make everything just make a lot more sense. While in Volume 1, Mike may have, through continual repressing of his feelings and accepting he'll never act on them, be able to return to that old dynamic, with this latest revelation, he may be thrown off again, worrying what others may think about him and that what they're thinking could maybe be true. However, I think this topic requires a whole separate video, as it's very complex and nuanced, and I don't think can be done justice just in one point here. Number 7. The Epilogue Mike and his imagined future for Will. Now, Epilogue Mike is an interesting character. Many have noticed his change in physical appearance, seeming more to resemble his father now, which could be a visual parallel trying to show that they've grown more similar, with Ted also being known to struggle with emotional vulnerability and opening up in his relationships with people and ending up in a loveless marriage, which could unfortunately be the road Mike is heading down. There have also been many jokes going around about Will's epilogue boyfriend, who is part of Mike's imagined future for them all, and in this, we see someone who physically resembles Mike quite a bit, especially pre epilogue Mike, and even kind of dresses similarly, which could be a tiny bit of subconscious jealousy at this future boy Will meet and be with that Mike believes could never be him. And lastly, number 8, the final D&D game. And is there still hope for Mike? I wanted to end this on a positive note because I think that there actually is still hope for Mike. And while many aspects of the finale and Mike's ending give messages of conformity, and while I think he's definitely seen the intentions on the writers now, I think there are still aspects of Mike's ending that still give hope to the future, where he can start to open up and accept himself more for who he is. While there may have been a lot of jokes going around about Mike not being able to grow up like the others and ending up playing D&D in his basement still, I think this actually does show hope for Mike, because when you look back and take in the wider context from season 3, where Mike's rejection of D&D and other so-called childish things in favour of relationships and a girlfriend are intrinsically tied to this performance of how he believed he should be acting whilst growing up, emulating sentiments he started to see his other peers expressing, and wanting to distance himself from Will and their childhood together for the fear of what that was starting to mean, and that others could see him as being behind and not normal. While this rejection of childhood and later more of an acceptance of it again is kind of common for people during teenage years, for Mike, I think it's a lot more and very clearly linked to his feelings for Will and his struggles with compulsory heterosexuality and internalized homophobia. In season 3, he saw Will's acceptance of his own difference and was scared of that, and wanted to make it clear to the world that he was not like this and was as normal as possible, and experiencing and showing interest in all the same things that his other peers were, whether or not actually feeling them himself. And this return to his old self, accepting these childhood interests, which is what partly drew him and Will so close together to begin with, and also starting to be more open, both in showing emotional vulnerability and also in stopping trying to repress his emotions so much of the time that his silly, goofy side is able to come out again. So I think there is hope for Mike Wheeler actually. He may not be there yet, and it may take him a while, but I think he does have the potential to change and is showing signs of taking steps in the right direction. So, that's the end of this video, a rundown of all the queer coding that I found in Mike Wheeler in Season 5 of Stranger Things. Let me know in the comments if you noticed any other things and what you thought about this. I know Mike has been a character of a lot of discussion due to his sidelining as a result of certain plots probably not wanting to be shown in the story, and instead certain other narratives emphasised by the writers, and I will discuss this more in the future. But for now, I wanted to end this on a positive note, and the hope that this still is for Mike Wheeler. Because, after all, while the writers may have had certain things in mind, at the end of the day, there are things in the final story they put out that do point towards this, and this explanation does make a lot of sense for Mike's character changes. And after all, part of the fun of fiction is that there is a level of audience interpretation to these characters, and that this allows different interpretations and representations to be seen. And yes, that is a real thing, despite the recent overuse of this phrase by the Duffers as an excuse for all their plot holes and abandoned plot threads. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts below and anything else you want to see, and have a great day.